In 1945, the US was preparing a third nuclear bomb that never dropped, but one man unleashed it on himself. By 1946, the world was still reeling from the nuclear destruction in Japan that ended World War II. What fewer people know was that a third plutonium core had been created. It was a twin in spirit to the one that dropped on Nagasaki. Its nickname at the time was Rufus, and its purpose was to stand by for a third strike if Japan refused to surrender, and it had a launch date, August 19, 1945. But Japan surrendered before it had a chance to drop. So the core stayed in New Mexico, at Los Alamos, and slipped from weapon to a research subject. Later, it was given a new name, the Demon Core. For the scientists at Los Alamos, the core represented unfinished business. The war had ended, but their curiosity had not. What had once been a military project turned into a series of dangerous physics experiments. The core was used in critical assembly experiments that pushed it right to the edge of going nuclear, then pulled it back. Louis Slotin was an elite bomb assembler, but he was preparing to leave Los Alamos for good. He wanted to return to civilian life. As he was getting ready to leave, he gave a tour around the facility to his replacement, physicist Alvin Graves. Alvin spotted the core and wanted to see the critical assembly experiment for himself. Slotin had done the procedure many times before, often with a small audience. People described his confidence as magnetic, equal parts brilliant and reckless. The experiments consisted of the core, which was a plutonium pit the size of a grapefruit, and two dome-shaped shells made of beryllium. The shells served as a mirror for neutrons, reflecting energy back toward the core, bringing it closer to criticality. If the two shells fully closed around the core, a dangerous chain reaction would occur. But if a tiny gap was kept open, the neutrons leaked away faster than they multiplied. The entire safety margin of the experiment was measured in millimeters. A single misplaced motion could shift the neutron economy from stable to runaway. 7 of Slotin's colleagues gathered to watch the experiment with Graves. All of these men knew that they were in the presence of the most dangerous object on planet Earth. It could level a city if weaponized. In fact, Slotin had experienced its power just 9 months prior, when working with his colleague Harry Daghlian. Daghlian accidentally dropped a tungsten carbide brick, which was another kind of neutron reflector like the domes, onto the core, and it surged. Daghlian knocked the stack away soon enough to prevent a disaster, but the exposure was fatal. Slotin watched Daghlian die, which made his demonstration to Graves all the more strange. His handling of the core went so against every lab safety protocol that he couldn't have handled it more dangerously. He did not use spacers to prevent the spheres from closing. He gripped the top hemisphere with his bare hand, lowered it toward the pit, and propped the gap open with the tip of a screwdriver, easing closer, millimeter by millimeter, as the counter chattered. His colleagues watched. No one interrupted. Suddenly, the room filled with a blinding flash of blue light, and everyone felt a blast of heat. Slotin flipped the reactor off in under a second, but it was too late. His screwdriver had slipped a fraction of an inch, allowing the reflector to fully close. Everyone was silent except for Slotin, who said, "Well, that does it." He then scrambled to sketch a diagram of where each man in the room was standing when the accident happened. He had absorbed a dose of radiation orders of magnitude above fatal. His body shielded everyone in the room from receiving much of the radiation except Graves. Graves, who was standing beside him, experienced temporary vision damage and became critically ill after the incident, but survived. Slotin was not as fortunate. It took him 9 days to die in agony. A doctor described his state as though all of his organs had been burned by a 3-dimensional sunburn. The burst itself is what physicists later called a prompt critical excursion. It lasted only a few milliseconds, but released a torrent of neutrons and gamma rays, strong enough to ionize the air, which turned it blue. After Slotin's death, people were banned from using their bare hands to test criticality forever. The Demon Core itself was melted down and recycled into other experiments, but it's remained a cautionary tale.